E360 TV proudly presents messages of inspirational stories. Live streaming now to millions of devices, including Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, Android TV, YouTube Live, Facebook Live, with your host, Donna and Jim, producer and host, Jim Grant, producer and host, along with Michaela Vidal, administrator and host, and Gaia Balconi Wada, editor-in-chief.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Messages of Inspirational Stories. Today is part 2 of living with mental health illness. One of the most common mental illnesses that I think society is dealing with right now is anxiety. So many people have anxiety, and I think it's something, honestly, that we don't talk enough about.
You're exactly right, Donna, because a lot of people are angry, they're frustrated, and they just react unreasonable. We see a lot of what I call meanness and evilness and wickedness just vomited on society. Everything from we want to label a person to we want to be mean to a person to we were last week, we were in Tomball and Donna was driving. Gaia was right. She was shotgun and GPS. She was navigating us. I'm sitting in the back seat. Emerson Brantley and his beautiful bride, Anne, she's been his wife for many years. And Donna, we were stopped, and you just kindly motioned for someone to pull out and go ahead. And Anne tapped her on the shoulder and says, I love that because that's what I believe in, or words to that effect. You remember that, Donna, Gaia? You guys remember that?
It was merging traffic.
Yeah.
And many times we're impatient and we don't give enough, right?
Yeah.
So I've always believed in, my goodness, if everyone, when you have a merging situation, it's just common decency to do a onesie, right?
Yeah.
Let one person go and let the other. Because personally, I think it's terribly rude for me to not do that.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And we don't know what this creates in people's day.
Well, one thing we do know, and I'm going to hush and let Gaia say something because she's joined us today to really add some great content to our subject. But what we do know is when you show an act of kindness, just like when you show an act of being unkind or mean,
right?
Both of those get paid forward. Think about that. They really do.
They do, in dividends, no matter which way you do it.
That's right. And Gaia, we're so happy to have you with us today. You were on the show with me yesterday. She had to put me for the whole hour, ladies and gentlemen.
I know. And she did really well doing that too, Jim. I watched the show. It was amazing.
And she came back.
And she smiled.
Yeah, and I found her, she was smiling yesterday, and I thought she was happy to be here, but then I found out afterwards she was giggling at me. So anyway, that's we have a good time here too, but the subject we're talking about, and Gaia's going to get into a lot of the good stuff there. It's very, very serious, but it's also very, very important for us to recognize and go on truths founded in love and get away from myths, ignorance, and avoidance.
Correct. So Gaia, let's talk about some of the anxiety disorders that people deal with.
So there's quite a few. It ranges from anything from agoraphobia, something with like a physical medical condition, to panic disorders, selective mutism even, which a lot of people don't know about. Separation anxiety, social anxiety, phobias, substance-induced anxiety, and the last one is kind of generalized anxiety, something that isn't tied down to like one specific thing.
Mhm.
It's just anything from anything and everything, really.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but panic disorder is often induced by the anxieties. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's another form of an anxiety disorder.
So, these are all, extremely different anxieties, but it's important to note that a person can have one or multiple,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it isn't just a, one kind of panic disorder, anxiety would fit all people. So oftentimes you can have a multitude of them. But what's really important is when you notice in someone you love and they've not been diagnosed, that you talk with them about getting help, because if it goes unchecked, it can create absolute havoc in their life. And that's
Very,
huge.
very much.
And you need to do it from a place of love, right? You need to do it with a place of in a place of love, because I think too often, especially in the world today, we're so busy. There's so much going at us that we can be short and snappy, and instead of coming from a place of love, say, this is ridiculous that you're just acting like this, right? And so what that does when a person is in anxiety and they don't know it, it acts, if I could use my tongue right, it grows and it becomes even bigger. And then that anxiety becomes even larger. So you're not helping, you're not part of the solution, you're becoming part of the problem. And that's super important to understand.
Oh, very, very much. It it can really get to the point where things become very much out of control. You can kind of have a bit of a breakdown. And it's not really in our control almost. It's not, you shouldn't take lack of responsibility if you're doing something wrong or hurtful. Because I'm a big firm believer in taking responsibility for your actions. Even if it's something to do with mental health. Just because you have a mental health disorder doesn't mean you shouldn't take the next necessary steps to make up for something if you did it wrong.
It's not an excuse to do the right thing.
Exactly.
And one of the things too in life, we all love to be loved. We all like to have grace, mercy, and forgiveness in our life. We should practice that with everyone we come in contact with, because many times when we say something like, snap out of it, or what's wrong with you, or whatever, we're not really trying to solve the problem. All we're trying to do is win our side of the argument or prove it. And that always winds up in a train wreck, especially when someone is dealing with anxiety, because one of the hardest things I have found to discover when someone is really torqued up about something on the inside is trying to figure out what it is that's going on within them. Because many times people can be upset about something, but they can't talk about it.
Right. And we as humans, this is a cycle, I believe, that needs to be broke. Instead of coming from a place of love more, we become accusational.
Exactly.
Right? What the hell is wrong with you? Well, gee, that really solves everything.
Yeah.
I mean,
anxiety is such a broad-reaching spectrum.
Or in the world of men, being in the military, we always had that famous saying, just shut up and suck it up.
Or man up, right?
Yeah, man up and stand up and all that stuff. Well, that may sound good, but the fact of it is everyone, hurts. Everyone knows what it's like to lose something. Everyone knows what it's like to have a panic attack or have anxiety in their life. Everyone knows what fear is. We're all worried about something.
Right.
And some people that's a daily part of life,
Yes.
and it's very much hard for them to, it's
Mhm.
something that you can't just suck it up and
Yeah.
Turn off.
exactly. I mean, you have coping mechanisms, but sometimes coping mechanisms fail,
Right.
and it becomes very uncomfortable for other people to see their loved ones or somebody they know deal with those issues. And it becomes a daily struggle in our lives where it's extremely difficult to break out of that cycle
Mm-hmm.
and to, how do I word this? Live a higher quality of life.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
So one of the things I found is that you can say to the person when they have anxiety and they know what's going on, what can I do to help you when you're in that place, when you're in that space? And it may be that you just sit with them. It may be that you just talk with them. It obviously doesn't have to be about what they're having anxiety about, because from my 30,000-foot view, sometimes just having a conversation about different things, not anxiety induced what's going on, helps change the paradigms
Mm-hmm.
in that person who's having anxiety.
Mm-hmm. It really helps to get you out of that mental space.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
It kind of goes back to what we talked about yesterday, is being there for somebody. When we're dealing with our mental health issues, it's very important to have that support system. And support systems are absolutely the best things you can have when you're dealing with mental health issues.
And if I can add something to that, Gaia, having support systems in different people, because each person that is super close to you brings a different aspect of support
Oh, completely.
and a different level of emotional support.
It definitely, because everybody has their own personalities and their own ways of doing things. Like, for example, my sister will bring me food, or we'll go out, or we'll just have a quiet day in,
Mm-hmm.
watch a movie or something. We don't even have to talk. And that's invaluable.
Right. And we often just talk.
Mm-hmm. Doing something different and getting out of that mental space is so, so, so crucial.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
If I look a little distracted, I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. I got Dixie in here, and for some reason, instead of relieving my anxiety and my stress, she's increasing it. She is really wound up. I don't know what, maybe she had an extra bowl of Wheaties. But from 2020 on, a lot of people out there, their lives changed.
Oh,
They
yeah.
went into a totally different world that they were exposed to. They felt like they were out of control. And this really raised the anxiety within. And we just don't really realize how much harm that anxiety does in our life, physically, mentally, our family, our
Mm-hmm.
social network. It has a way of isolating us too.
Right.
And isolation, because we're social creatures, that works against us big time. And that's why it's so important to be able to, for someone to feel comfortable enough to go out and have a cup of coffee with you and talk about something different, to be able to relax and maybe reach the level to where they can communicate with you.
Absolutely.
That's very, very important. And we need to take the time to realize that they're worth it.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to hit this point, if I could, as a parent. As parents, there's no rule book, right?
Mhm.
And we want to do the best all the time for our children. And sometimes we get caught up in, oh my God, what did I do? What could I have done better? And that is so unfair, because then you're in your own headspace, and like for me, I don't have that kind of anxiety. I don't have that kind of depression. Not saying that I haven't had anxiety moments in my life or depressional episodes in life, you
Hmm.
know, with death or loss or you know, something catastrophic that has happened in my life.
Hmm.
But I don't, as a general rule, I'm just, that's just not, I don't have that.
Yeah.
So it's really important to understand as a parent, do not put yourself into that pigeonhole where you are giving yourself, putting yourself down, and that you could have done something more, because dang it, sometimes it just happens.
Hmm.
Oh, yeah, completely. It's like we talked about yesterday, learning to support yourself, uh,
Hmm.
and how to educate yourself
Hmm.
about other people's mental health issues. And that really gives you a better perspective of how you're going to interact with that person in that moment, so you don't
Right,
feel like you failed them.
right,
Because
Yeah.
it's not always a cause for mental illness. A lot of times it's genetic,
Hmm.
and
right,
not everybody in your family will have it. Um,
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes your family will have it. Sometimes there's a long history of it in your family, but
Mm.
that doesn't make it your fault. And learning that really
right.
helps you connect with that person on a much better level.
And I would also interject with this that as a support person, it is important to talk to the person that is your loved one, that's near and dear to you, when they are not in that anxious moment or in that depressive moment, to say, okay, what are some of the things that you deal with, so that I know and so I understand. Because, you know, if we don't ask, how can we help?
Hmm.
Because it's depression and anxiety. Well, geez, they're different for everybody,
Hmm.
right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So just like there's so many other diseases out there, that just because you have 6 symptoms the same doesn't mean that the other 8 are going to be the same,
Hmm.
right? I know that with MS. My MS is different than somebody else's MS. So it's so
Hmm.
crucially important to be able
Yeah.
to be open and honest and have that conversation and say,
Hmm.
what are some of the things that you are dealing with? Because I don't know. And so that when you're in that space and you want to talk to me, or I can help you in any way, I kind of know how to navigate those waters.
Completely. It's talking to somebody, making a game plan when they're in a better headspace really does make a world of difference,
Hmm.
because they might be able to articulate better than when they're in those throes of depression or anxiety. And especially when you're in those moments, you probably don't have a game plan, or your head's not really on right,
Right.
for lack of a better word. And you might not be able to articulate what you need and what you want at that
Hmm.
moment. And it becomes very frustrating for other people because they can't help you when they really
Well,
want to.
that's true. And the other thing, what I have learned is that also by knowing, it helps me avoid additional triggers
Mm-hmm.
for you, right?
Exactly.
And that's a biggie, because you know, we can trigger something with somebody with anxiety or depression without knowing it, if we haven't had
Hmm.
that conversation. And that's the
Oh,
last
yeah.
thing we want to do, is, you know, make that situation worse.
Hmm.
There's definitely coming up with a game plan and different exercises you can employ. It's all part about building your support system,
Hmm.
um, and having a support group ready for when those moments happen,
Hmm.
and how they can jump in and help you deal with that situation in that moment.
If I may, I'd like to share very quickly how May became the Mental Health Awareness Month.
Hmm.
This started back in a gentleman that was born in 1876, and his name was Clifton Winningham Beers. And he was born in Connecticut. He was one of 5 children in his family. All of them suffered from some form of mental illness and psychological distress. As a result, all of them, the whole family, spent time in mental institutions. And from his own personal experience, he discovered that the mental health field had a notorious reputation for malpractice, maltreatment, and immense bias. And
Oh, yeah.
that really inspired him to write a book called A Mind, AMIND, that found itself. And it's even a bestseller today. And he founded the National Committee for Mental Hygiene. And the month of May has been recognized as been the month of recognizing Mental Health Awareness Month since 1949. And folks, we've done a pitiful job of recognizing that, sharing that, and even caring about that.
And understanding.
Mm-hmm. It's such taboo topic.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that really stems from, as you were saying, those old mental institutions where, sometimes when you got into them, you never got out of them.
Oh, yeah.
And, it was such a bad thing for a family to have that reputation of one of the family members having a mental illness.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And,
And
like Jim and I talked about yesterday, even medication stigmas and people talking down about medication. Because some people rely on a lot of medication for their mental health issues.
Well, the stigma that bothers me about this, in all honesty, is if we had cancer, or like I have MS, I've had, my brain surgeries. Nobody thinks twice about that. They think, oh my gosh, are you okay? If I were on medications, they're like, oh, that's totally understandable. I mean, oh my gosh, she has MS. She has arthritis, But when you say you have, a mental illness, that stigma comes up as like, oh, my God, they're crazy, right?
Oh, yeah.
They're on medicine. Oh, yeah, well, of course they are. And that stigma is so wrong, because why is it okay here, but it's not okay here?
It's definitely a double standard that needs to change, because people need to look at it less from like, oh, you're just taking a bunch of pills and that's kind of wrong, to you're trying to balance your brain chemistry. Like therapy and stuff doesn't cure bipolar disorder. It doesn't cure schizophrenia. It doesn't cure generalized anxiety disorder.
Yeah.
There's so many serious mental health issues that, the field of pharmacology can really, really make the biggest difference in somebody's life. And it all boils down to quality of life. There are so many horrible side effects from mental health pills. Not all of them. Some of them are really great. But a lot of them have serious side effects sometimes. And nobody wants to deal with that. It kind of comes down to a last resort in order to increase your quality of life. And that's so important. And we shouldn't stigmatize nor look down on people who are just trying to live their best life. That's something everybody should pursue. And there shouldn't be this horrible double standard of like, well, I can take medicine for a physical medical issue, but not for one that's mental.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I remember when you're talking about that, it reminded me of what I said yesterday about my son-in-law when he committed suicide. He suffered from chronic traumatic encephalopathy, commonly known as CTE. But that is a brain injury that can affect everybody. If you fall and hit the ground and bang your head, you have a chance of suffering a TBI. And we know firsthand very well how we felt. But when we lost him to suicide, that was a taboo subject too. And I don't want to, veer off from our topic, but my point was that was the time when we sat there, and even amongst our family and when a couple of friends would come over, no one would say anything.
Right.
They didn't know what to say. And the
It
same
becomes
thing
an
is,
awkward silence.
yes. And you feel very uncomfortable. In fact, we remember Thanksgiving that year because it was right before Thanksgiving, but Christmas that year, none of us remember it. Total
Right.
blank. But my point being is that, whenever we feel so uncomfortable about something and it becomes a taboo subject,
Hmm.
that's telling us that we have a problem with ignorance and misunderstanding. And we need to own that.
Well, we
Completely.
and we become uncomfortable in our own skin, right?
Yes.
Because it isn't directly happening to me, right?
Yeah. And it kind of becomes a case of the me, me, me. Like,
Mhm.
what could I have done? What should have been done differently?
Woulda,
How
coulda,
could I
shoulda.
help them? Yeah.
Woulda,
And
coulda, shoulda. Hmm.
when it comes down to it, suicide really has nothing to do with anyone else
Correct.
except a person. I mean, sometimes, of course, not everybody's the same. There might be a really horrible circumstance somebody's in,
Right.
which may correlate to an outside person, right? I don't want to generalize.
Right. There are
But,
instances of.
mhm. But generally, suicide is a very personal thing. And one of the things I hate the most is like when people say um, suicide is a selfish act,
Mm.
because then that becomes about them and not the person,
Mhm.
right? And they're putting that on themselves. And, it's a horrible thing to lose somebody to suicide, but
Mhm.
suicide is something we have to talk about no
Mhm.
matter what, because millions of people deal with suicidal ideation, and we lose a lot of people to suicide. But if
Mhm.
we talk about it more and we recognize the symptoms, like Jim and I were talking about yesterday,
Yeah.
there's a reason we should educate ourselves about mental health issues. Because if you can see the symptoms, then you
Mhm.
can help that person.
A good example, and I don't know the details about it, but the day before Naomi Judd was to be inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame, she was suffering from anxiety so much
She had depression and
and
anxiety
depression,
both.
that it seemed the better way out for her rather than go through that. And I admire her family for having the courage of speaking up about it because it's nothing to, because I had one family member, actually, she was a friend of the family, says, don't put the word suicide in on Facebook. What you me do? Lie about it?
Right.
Donna can tell you one of my faults is that I'm very candid, open, and honest. Maybe
Good.
too open and too honest. But the fact of it is, I would not participate in hiding my head in the sand like an ostrich and
Hmm.
pretend, it didn't happen because it did happen. And like in Naomi's case there, uh, I mean,
Why no?
Miss
No, Naomi.
Naomi, yeah, they're both great singers, and I love their music and all that. But in her case, there, bless her heart, no one knows the living hell she was going through.
Right.
And when someone's mind is that at war with themselves, I know and I believe in my heart that the Creator understands that because He's
Hmm.
all about love and grace and forgiveness. Because that's just, it's sad when someone gets to that point.
Hmm.
And that's why we need to be open and honest and talk about things like this. That's uncomfortable.
Well, and I think in talking about this, there's something I'd like to bring up.
Okay.
Because even though we have come a long way, even in the last decade, okay, just the last decade, we've come a long way. But we have to do a better job because we have more and more young children,
Hmm.
children who are suffering from this and taking their lives through mental illness.
Hmm.
Mm.
And so if we can come together as a whole with love and as much understanding as we can, because like I will never fully understand all of it because I don't live in that space. I can understand part of that. Gaia, we've had that conversation,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I can
Completely.
understand part of it.
It's definitely something that when we push to understand it, we can alleviate some people's suffering. Again,
Exactly.
you can't always cure it, but you can help them in that moment.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, if people knew the risk factors,
Mm-hmm.
if they
Right.
knew family history of it and they talked about it, and they know people's symptoms, they may not understand them, but they recognize them, and then they can help step in to alleviate them.
Right.
Again, it's a simple, especially if you're dealing with a young child. A lot of parents feel guilt about it,
Mhm.
but in my personal experience, I've been dealing with it for a very, very long time since I was a child. But it's nobody's fault. But if we educate ourselves, we can do a lot of good,
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully, maybe one day cut down the suicide rates.
Absolutely. And that's
Again, there's no
the end
cure-all.
result.
Hmm. There's no cure-all, but maybe it's just wishful thinking. But if people bother to educate themselves, we would have a much better chance of helping people and possibly save lives.
Well, and I
Well,
think if I could, one of the other issues that bothers me with people that you have mental illness is that those who don't say, oh, they can't have a life. They're on too
Exactly.
much medication. I mean, how can they be productive? Geez, do you see
mm,
the medication they're on? Really? They can be productive, and it's about balance, and it's about, like you said, it's about getting the chemicals in your brain to be, for the improper terminology, firing on all the right cylinders, right?
Hmm.
Because some of them aren't firing in the way that they should be, which is why we're there in the first place. So in understanding that, but us doing our part and lifting them up instead of pushing them away
mm-hmm.
makes a huge difference in
Mm-hmm.
enhancing not only their life, but think about this, folks, all the lives they touch. How
Oh
many,
yeah.
if we touch one person's life on this show today,
Mm-hmm.
then you know what? Our job is done.
Mm.
And we've
Yes.
done amazingly well.
Mm-hmm. You're exactly right, Donna, because when it comes to, treat people with love and respect, we covered that quite a bit yesterday about the LLAR system. Everybody wants
Hmm.
to be loved, liked, appreciated, and respected. And that goes for people that we don't agree with, or we may have different beliefs in certain areas on certain things, from politics or whatever. But you still have the responsibility to love, like, appreciate, and respect that person, and just give them space.
Hmm.
If they're out of balance with you, so what? You're out of balance with a lot of people yourself. That's why you bounce off the walls sometimes. I'm speaking mentally now, not physically, hopefully not physically. But when it comes to our responsibility, I love that song by Joe South. It was a number one hit back in 1969. He hit the nail on the head when he sang the song, Walk a Mile in My Shoes,
Hmm.
before you criticize and accuse.
I
And
love
it's a, hmm?
I love that.
Yeah, it's a song, and it was a number one hit for Joe South. And I always liked Joe, and he's no longer with us. Uh, but he was a great singer, great songwriter. He wrote from the heart.
Right.
And that's like our friend Marty Haggard, his dad. He wrote from the heart about his life, the people he knew, things he saw, and all that. That's why it was such a great hit. So, therefore, if you want to be successful in your life, come from your heart and just be a friend to
Hmm.
one person at a time. You want to change the world? One person at a time. You
Right.
can't do it with a busload of people, right? One person at a time. That's the best advice I can give.
And I think the whole point of mental, um, mental awareness is like you said, walking a mile in somebody's shoes. If you don't understand it because you don't experience it, try to put yourself in that situation. You know,
Trying to
the
be
same
empathetic.
way, the same way you would with somebody with like a physical medical condition.
Correct.
You know,
Oh, yeah.
we always try to do that. You know, we're always sympathetic to people with ailments or diseases and such as that. But when it comes to like mental disorders and especially mental health issues, people rarely care. But, you know, walking a mile in somebody's shoes really puts into perspective, you know, their issues, their struggles,
Yeah.
and helps you connect with that person.
Mhm.
You don't have to understand it, but if you care about it, that means the world to people like us struggling.
And even if you don't understand it, but you care and you show up and say, look, I don't understand what it is you're going through, but I want you to know I am here for you anytime, day or night. You know what? That one sentence can make the difference in somebody's life. Okay, I'll be back.
And I like to add one thing too. Also, as you travel down the pathway of life and you don't know someone, you haven't walked a mile in their shoes, watch your mouth. Let me share something that happened to me. The mountains behind me there is Bisbee, Arizona. I have a daughter buried there. And our first child was Lisa, healthy, happy. She's still with us, thank the good Lord. But my second daughter, Christina Yvonne, she was not. We were not able to bring her home. Her little lungs did not develop properly, and she passed away a few hours after birth. And uh, she was born in Agua Prieta, Sonora, Mexico. And I was able to take. I wanted to find out why. I was able to take her, transport her in my car by myself. And the doctor says, "Go get a styrofoam chest, put some ice in it, bring it back." And I watched them pack my infant daughter in a styrofoam chest of ice. I put it in the back seat of my car. I drove that thing from Agua Prieta, which is on the other side of Douglas, Arizona, Agua Prieta, and to Tucson. And I heard that thing squeak as a styrofoam chest can squeak. And we got up there, and that's when the autopsy was performed, found out all that. But anyway, I was at a party, and there was this one lady there the only two things we had in common, we had the same friends and we didn't like each other. Okay. That's where the road forked. And one of my buddies offered me a drink, and they had some drinks in the refrigerator. And I just said, no, thank you. I can't drink out of anything in a styrofoam chest. Now, you know the reason why.
Right.
She immediately turned and got in my face like this, says, "I think you're weird." I have never hit a woman in my life, ladies and gentlemen, but that's about as close. I felt like slapping her so hard, but I just looked at the ignorance of her
Right.
and I walked away. And I'm glad I did. But I mean, that's what I mean about sometimes maybe not intentionally, but we can say the wrong thing at the wrong time, not knowing that we can hurt someone.
And
I've been
it can
guilty
be trigger.
and I've been guilty of that myself. So,
Sure.
it's
We
a
all
self,
have, Jim.
well, yeah, absolutely.
And the great thing lately, I've noticed, especially with younger generations, people are talking about mental health. You know, I see people opening up about their struggles, and that really makes a huge difference because a lot of people, almost everybody, will probably deal with some sort of mental health issue in their life, like we talked about yesterday. But some of us deal with severely chronic conditions, and hearing other people talk about it really gives us hope because we can be open and honest about it. It's not some secret that we have to hide from people. You know, we can talk about it to our employers because a lot of mental health conditions are protected under federal discriminatory, what was it? I forget the term for it, but it's protected against discrimination, right?
Correct.
But a lot of people don't seek treatment, so they don't know because they're afraid, or they're afraid to tell their employers because they're afraid of what their employers are going to think or say, or if they might lose their job, or you know, but you can definitely receive not aid, but help from your employers, you know,
Right.
time off, extra sick days. Because a lot of people, like, I can't call in depressed.
Hmm.
You know, I could call in sick, but like, I can't say I can't get out of bed today.
Right.
You know what I mean? But it's
Mhm.
important for us to be able to say that. It's important for us to be able to talk about that, just as we would if somebody was sick with the flu. And again, it ties back to people are much more comfortable talking about medical conditions than they are mental health conditions.
Mhm.
And we have to change that dynamic, but it's slowly being changed.
Right. And I think it's important to understand that if you are in that situation, that you work for a company and you have mental illness, that you can look into FMLA, right? And that protects you by law, by federal law. And I know I've been on it 3 times in my life, but it protects you, it protects your job. And so understand that that's out there, and a lot of people know it's there, but they don't understand that the huge umbrella that can fall under.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it isn't just one thing. So that's just something you go to your doctor and you say, look, I think I need to file for FMLA. And what that does is it ensures that if you need that time off, and depending on how your company runs, usually your vacation, sick leave, paid time off, whatever is used up first. But then after that, if you are having that day, right, where you can't go to work, that you can call in and say, I'm sorry, I can't make it in today. And you are protected so that you can do what you need to do to get the rest, to get yourself in a better space and heal and not worry about your job.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely crucial because a lot of times people with mental health, chronic mental health, using your coping skills and your grounding skills goes so far in order to lessen your symptoms
Mm-hmm.
and help maybe abate what you're dealing with. It's not perfect, but it can definitely help. And knowing that you have that support behind you with work or whatever really makes a world of difference and really helps people to get better.
Right.
Not be cured, but get better in that moment.
And I think on the same token, if you feel like you are being discriminated against, like you talked about earlier, Gaia, just a few moments ago, understand that you can reach out to these organizations and get guidance and get support and help, because it is illegal to discriminate.
Completely. And, you know, it kind of goes back again to that taboo where people are just like, it's an excuse. It's not that hard. Get over it. You know, it's just a crutch.
Right.
But it's very much not. It's something that's extremely difficult to deal with. And people need to realize that. Employers need to realize that. And I think I see that happening. You know, I've had jobs that have been very supportive of it. And that literally takes a mountain of weight off my shoulders.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
It's so important for people to be open-minded and communicate, because let's be honest, all of us have suffered anxiety, as I said earlier, but it's really amazing how we all know we all need a good night's sleep. But if something is bothering us, we get a poor night's sleep. That complicates the problem. And over a period of time, that can really put us in a dark place.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's so important for us to be able to recognize when someone is changed or someone looks troubled. Look at their face, look at their eyes.
Yeah, and that really goes into learning about the symptoms and warning signs.
Yeah.
Like different risk factors or stuff. Like if you know somebody's struggled with this and you know them being distant, or very irritable, or talking about things that are really concerning, like, I'm going to be writing a will. Like, is there something you want of mine? Little things like that are really, really important signs, especially for suicide. And just knowing enough about their mental illness to know like what signs you need to look out for. You don't need to be a doctor, but and you don't need to try to, again, I say this a lot, you shouldn't try to cure them.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think it's more annoying than somebody trying to fix you. Nobody likes that.
Right.
And take a look at their appearance and all, because sometimes a person who's always, shaves, if this guy shaves, has his hair combed and all that, or a lady always looks immaculate, and they just don't look like they spent that much time on themselves that they normally do. Or if they get quieter, that is a major warning sign. Because if a person is quiet, there's no release.
Right.
And it's going to build up until it explodes.
Well, and so in my case, because Gaia and I don't live in the same state, and I've always been extremely intuitive with my children, but I can call her up and say, "Hey, babe," and she'll say, "Hi, Mom," and I immediately know in your response, Gaia, kind of where you're at, and I'm like, what's going on, sweetheart? So, learning to hear the different tonality or inflections in somebody's voice can lead you into helping them or just being there to support them.
Exactly, and that really ties well back into educating yourself and learning about those things, because something as simple as a hug, something like, for example, my husband always says, you can wake me up out of a dead sleep if you need it. We kind of have opposite schedules. So, but like, I know there's somebody there who I can go to. I know I can call my mom, I know I can call my sister and stuff of that nature. And that support system really helps a lot. But it kind of just really, really solidifies that how important the need for education is, and to get rid of this taboo.
Well, and it also helps the person who is suffering understand at all times. And this is one of the worst things, and I know we've talked about it again, but I think it's worth saying one more time. They aren't alone. That they aren't alone. There is nothing worse than being alone and having a mental illness and no one to turn to, no one to help you, no one to say, "Baby, I'm right here for you. It's okay." I will do whatever I need to do to help you. If I just listen to you, and like you said, there's a lot of physical things, just being in presence, or in their presence, bringing food, listening to music, whatever the case may be, but just being there.
And I'd like to inject something, if I may. It's important for you to seek out people who are that you have things in common with. And me being spent 38 years in the military, I know how I felt when I came back from Vietnam. I was totally alone. And I'm going to share this little incident. I'm going to keep it very short. Don't want to make it boring. But I was sitting there with my family. We're having a meal, welcome home kind of a meal. And it was, just a family. And we're eating. And my sister Helen looks at me. She says, "Jimmy, what was it like over there?" And I looked up, and all the eyes were on me from my family. And I couldn't handle it. I couldn't even say anything. It just kind of shocked me. So I said, "Excuse me." And I got up and walked down the hallway, and I sat down in my bedroom. And I was just sitting there, and I questioned myself, why am I not happy? I'm home. I built up home to be like a place where the sun shines, the birds sings, everything is hunky-dory. That's the only thing we had to hope and live for, okay? And that was our world, the way our world turned. reality is the world didn't turn that way. And I wondered why I didn't feel happy that I'm home, I'm safe, it's over. And for a split second there, I thought I was losing my mind, and it scared me. And I remember I got up and I walked out into the bathroom there, and I washed my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. I was very pale, and I felt like I was just going to faint. And then I, felt bad leaving my family in the middle of a meal like that, but I just had to get out.
Mm-hmm.
And my point being, if I was able to have soldiers, Vietnam veteran soldiers in my, around me to talk about it, it would have really helped me.
Right.
But we did not have that outlet. So I'm saying, find people that you can talk to, get a support group. That's very, very important. And I can't emphasize that enough, because walking that road alone, carrying that load on your back, you're not being fair to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And, for me on the other side, as a parent, and the one thing that I feel that should not be done, and correct me, Gaia, if you think I'm wrong, I don't think I am, but that you can't be pushy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you cannot be, well, I'm your mom, so you need to tell me, right? You cannot go into that space, right? Because, even if they're younger, even if they're in a child mode, it is a different, it's such a different space in the head that you can't be pushy. So being empathetic and just being open in pure love is really the best way to get in there and be of support to someone dealing with a mental illness.
Yeah, it really, like Jim was saying, sometimes it's extremely difficult in that moment to know what you want, talk about it, and even be around people sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, like Jim, he just needed space.
Yep.
Just needed to walk away. And he couldn't talk about it, and maybe he didn't know why. But, having somebody who just could have been like, hey, do you need a hug?
Right.
Do you need to go on a walk? And maybe talking about coping skills rather than just being like, hey, what's wrong with you? Tell me about it.
Oh, yeah. That's the worst question to ask someone. That's almost as insulting and as rude to ask as someone would ask me, why are you so ugly? I don't know. It's not my fault. I mean,
Well, and I've helped Gaia with a breathing coping mechanism that that's something I offer to people. And it's a breathing technique that helps your body relax and refocus, and it recenters you. And what I have found is that it can get you out of the paradigm you're in, because now you've taken it and you're focusing on something else. And I'm not saying that always works, but I'm saying it can work. And so there are different things that you can do.
And ladies and gentlemen, we're running real close on time. And I just got to say this on behalf of Donna. I've known her for a long time. She's very, very passionate about helping people. You see the email address there, highenergyrightnow@gmail.com. If you contact Donna, she'll be more than happy to spend a 30-minute complimentary time with you to help you find out what's blocking you about the breathing exercises she has talked about. And I like the way she narrows it down. It's either a person, a place, or a thing, or a combination of the three that's really gnawing at you like a rat on cheese. And that's increasing your anxiety. So please get in touch with her. She'll be glad to visit with you.
Absolutely.
And we'll be back tomorrow with part 3 as we wind up this week on mental illness. And it's just a wonderful opportunity we have to be able to share some unpleasant topics with you, because it should be talked about, and we've got the courage to bring that. And we sincerely hope and pray that you will share this with others because, as Donna and I and Gaia, we all three revealed personal things about ourselves because we care enough about you that you can say, hey, I can relate to that comment or that situation. Have the courage to reach out. We hope and pray that you and your family are healthy and happy. We pray that you love yourself first, then you can love others. And most importantly, please get in touch with Donna. She'll be glad to visit with you and help you any way she can with the breathing exercises or help you cope with what's blocking you in your life from living the life that you so richly deserve. On behalf of Donna and Gaia, I'm Jim Grant. And thank you so much for tuning in today. We'll be back tomorrow. Take care of yourself. Remember to love yourself first, then you can love others. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye, folks.